Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Propagandacast with me, ImperialDane, and for you today we have a 1 vs 1 on Angoville. Yes, indeed, it is a return to Angoville, this small quaint piece of French farmland, which shall be the site of a small battle set during Operation Cobra this time around, or at least we imagine it's set during that, as always. And who shall be facing each other in this battle of two armies? In the northern corner we have Krismas forever. Very interesting name. Hauptmann Krismas of the Panzer Lehr Ausklarungsabteilung. And who shall he be facing? None other than me, ImperialDane, Major Dane of the 1st Infantry Division, able company, ready to deal those crowds some beatings. So, let us get on with it, shall we? And on to the action. Seeing the usual dual engineers, one barracks start there in the southern part, while the Kettenkrad as always trundles forward, as it of course is the Panzer Elite. So we'll definitely be seeing some Panzer Grenadiers coming out of here, and we're seeing the Kettenkrad speeding towards this fuel point, apparently hoping to seize it right away and then of course connect up and of course ensure that if I'm going to catch it I'm going to have a bit more trouble with it, since of course high points of high yield are much more difficult to capture than, say, for example, a low yield point. Which of course might not be entirely obvious, but there you go. And strategic points are, for example, some of the easiest points to capture, since they don't confer much in terms of resources except 3 manpower per minute or something like that. So, Panzer Grenadiers on the other hand marching towards the west, going straight for both fuel points. Quite interesting. I know he's stopping right there apparently, deciding on something else, but I'm not entirely sure what. Could be he might have spotted me on the minimap, of course seizing this point, of course going straight for this fuel point, since I'm of course not rather keen on giving my opponents as much fuel as possible. In fact, I'm keen on him getting as little fuel as possible, since that usually means he can get vehicles and whatnot. Of course, one thing is when you have queued up actions, and let's say, I'll just briefly pause, which I usually do. I start up by queuing up actions. For example, I'll do it like this: queue up this point, this point, this point, thus I have it all seized up. But for example, if this point is being taken or something else is being done with that point, then that action will be skipped over and then they will jump to the next point. Of course, how to queue up action is basically done by holding down shift and then ordering all the different things. That way you can, for example, just have your engineers seize a part of the map and then run it on the rest of that without continually having to give orders to take this point, take this point. Of course, if something like that happens, you will of course need to step in and, do something. Anyhow, back to the action. First rifleman team is on the field. Panzer Grenadiers moving towards here, sneaking up here and going for this cutoff point, as is rather usual on this map. Rather have a bit of a dislike of this point, in fact, since it is so easy to just run around and in fact harass this, and then of course just pop into a building and hide in there. So not exactly my favorite spot on the map. And usually you're better off, in fact, going to try heavily on this part of the map and then perhaps focusing a bit less, or at least getting some barbed wire up there. Riflemen moving in, doing their best to avoid all of those Panzer Grenadiers in the southern building, engaging these Panzer Grenadiers right up north, but further Panzer Grenadiers are marching in from the north as well. And Riflemen trying to get into this building for perhaps a slightly stronger position. Second Rifleman team has arrived from the south. But of course I'm quick to realize that this won't do me much good, because right, there's only one window on that side that can actually hit those chaps inside the building. Panzer Grenadiers of course return to harassing this area. Riflemen move towards the south. Panzer Elite of course have access to this fuel point right from the start. Panzer Grenadiers getting attacked from numerous points, hiding inside that building. And I go straight for this point while moving in my rifleman, deciding I'm going to oust him from this building no matter the cost. Since sometimes I can be a bit stubborn, and in some cases it can work off, other cases it usually ends up very badly for me. In this case though, these Panzer Grenadiers are getting quite terribly beaten and might even be killed on the retreat. Will it happen? Will it happen? Barely gets away despite being out in the middle of the road. But this is temporarily secure despite some heavy losses. Further riflemen are on the way, and meanwhile I'm having quite a nice time with the entire western area, because I'm keeping all of his Panzer Grenadiers busy in the east. Further Panzer Grenadiers are being marched out though, 4 Panzer Grenadier teams. Still no buildings though. And riflemen are receiving reinforcements, but there we go. Going for the logistic company right away. Riflemen receiving healing. And so far a bit of quiet in the action. Of course we have these Panzer Grenadiers marching towards here. Probably going to stop me seizing this fuel point. In fact, I barely have any fuel at the moment. It's only going to be a bit of a delay for me, while as he's of course has the high fuel point. Kettenkraut's now sneaking points, laying down mines in the central piece of road, always nice. And Kettenkraut forced back.
Reporting construction complete.
And riflemen swarming in towards the central area. These chaps are still holding out. And engaging these Panzer Grenadiers here, moving in riflemen from all sides perhaps. And also perhaps trying to knock out this Kettenkraut before it gets away, but instead it moves towards the west. With a damaged engine though. Forced a bit back here. I don't want to suffer too heavy losses while dealing with Panzer Grenadiers. The general thing is you want them to suffer heavy losses, not yourself. In the meanwhile, barbed wire is being laid down to protect this area and of course prevent any sneaky Panzer Grenadiers from moving in and harassing further. It's usually one method of doing it, but of course some are keen on just moving up towards the south from then. Bit tiresome, but there you go. Now moving in with a large force of Panzer riflemen from all sides to really get the drop on those Panzer Grenadiers. Further are moving in from the north, but they might not be there in time. Panzer Grenadiers continue to take quite a bit of fire and are forced to retreat right through all those riflemen, leaving behind only two, which of course might also suffer a bit heavily on the retreat. Might in fact, even with a bit of luck, be killed, but no. Leaving behind only one Panzer Grenadier team. Other Panzer Grenadier team is forced back to try and repair those Kettenkrauts, and at the same time I'm going for the weapon support center to get some heavy machine guns perhaps, or mortars to deal with all of those Panzer Grenadiers. And there we go, and I'm also suspecting he might be going for an armored car rush, but no, instead he's going for the scout car. A bit rarer though, but of course certainly not entirely bad. But you should note the slow rotation, and in fact it's only armed with a machine gun and not an auto cannon. Not looking good for those Panzer Grenadiers inside the building. A bit exposed and are down to only one man. Continuing to seize this point now, denying him, in fact both denying him this point if all goes well. Riflemen taking a bit of punishment from the scout car though, some pulling back since they're not very keen on dying. And now a larger surge of Panzer Grenadiers moving in. Riflemen continue to be reinforced while a heavy machine gun is moving in to try and contain the situation, and pinning down the engineers with the Gewehr 43 fire. And looks like I'll have to retreat these riflemen as well, pressing through with those scout cars and not looking good, and losing a rifleman team quite early on, quite devastating in fact, and quickly getting a replacement team. Scout car pushing on, forcing me away from this high fuel point. Certainly has something in mind with all of this heavy focus on fuel points, scout cars and whatnot. Of course, scout cars can also seize points. And armor-piercing rounds tearing through the lightly armored scout car might in fact knock it out. There we go, out of control and flying straight into the fuel point. Riflemen moving in to provide a bit of support.
Losing a victory point.
And Kettenkraut continuing its sneaky business in the west. And engineers and riflemen surging towards the center once more. Scout car is on the move, and what do we see? The Panzer Support Command scout car hitting a mine. So that's of course always a good reason to use mines. For generally in that spot, yes, you can always hit something. Generally, I find riflemen, Panzer Grenadiers trying to repair this while riflemen are trying to move in and seize upon this opportunity. Hey, machine gun trying to set up in a nice angle that will be able to deal with anything here, while not being so accessible itself. And there we go, suppressing the Panzer Grenadiers, forcing them into a full retreat, giving me a slight time to actually see some parts of this map. No doctrine as of yet though. Seizing this western victory point and the points here, so all nice and dandy. And let's go have a quick look at Hauptmann Krismas, going straight for the upgrade, and he will in fact have plenty of fuel, so he might in fact be rushing for the Panzer IV infantry support tank, also known as the Panzer IV F1. Certainly a bit interesting. In those cases, apparently not protecting himself against armored rushes, but of course, considering he's held most of the fuel point, I'm pretty sure he's confident I won't be getting any armored cars, or much to even stop him in those cases. So we'll have to see. And let us return to me. Heavy machine gun inching forward, seizing points. Bit of engagement here, riflemen and engineers setting upon these Panzer Grenadiers, but a scout car is quickly rushing in from the north to support those erstwhile Panzer Grenadiers. And the scout car flanks the riflemen, but while they are occupied with the Panzer Grenadiers. And in a full retreat, deciding this is probably not going to be the best situation, I'd rather better focus in the east, and secure that area. Barbed wire being laid down to sort of halt enemy movement. Scout car going for this point again, hoping to harass. Going for the supply yard as well. Heavy machine gun diverting its attention to try and deal with this scout car, of course. Really good on the harassment bits. Again, that's one of the more interesting aspects of this map, is there are several points which are generally good for harassment. And of course anyone keen on that can usually get away with it. Of course, I'm not a huge fan of it. In fact, I find it quite a pain in the ass, but of course that's the point of it. Scout car being caught on its own. Might take quite a bit of fire. So there we go. But it does manage to get away, but of course this has rendered this point inert, and of course all of these territories out of supply for how long it may last. And there we go. Panzer IV infantry support tank having rushed forward, and I'm of course completely unprepared for this slight trouble. And of course the supply yet hasn't been finished for some reason. Bit unfortunate, but there you go. Rushing it in with all haste and might. Not a happy situation for me. But continuing down, apparently opting to go straight for the base, of course. The ever ominous base rush, having the piece of armor that I don't or have any counter for. Quite sneaky, and of course what am I to do? Well, in this case I decide to absolutely ignore it with all of my infantry, since they can't do anything, and instead go straight for my opponent, and I hope to deal him some blows, while he of course is separate from the Panzer IV and probably a bit occupied with it. Locking it down, hammering away. And at this point I go for the airborne infantry, having realized I am of course going to need some anti-armor assets. In this case I decide for the airborne, since they don't require as many command points. And because those recoil rifles are a bit accurate at range. Engineers getting pinned down, but riflemen catching those Panzer Grenadiers out in the open. Airborne receiving the recoilless rifles as we speak. Moving in from several points and keeping those Panzer Grenadiers a bit off guard. Well, of course, this Panzer IV is continuing to blast away at my machine gun emplacements. Quite horrific, and will of course open up my base for later infantry assaults. And seizing a strategic point. Meanwhile, riflemen are occupying all of these Panzer Grenadiers, of course forced into a full retreat. And we are seeing some riflemen continue to sneak about here, seizing this area, of course, not keen on just letting him blast away at my base and doing nothing else. I'm of course going to ensure that he's going to have quite a bit of channels during all of that. And second rifleman team being a bit on its own, but at the same time it does manage a few casualties on those Panzer Grenadiers. And there we go, recoilless rifles have been upgraded for those airborne. And riflemen will have to be swift to get out of the arc of fire of the Panzer IV before they're blasted away. Airborne moving in from the south, ready to get some rear shots, and there we go. First one bouncing off, second one penetrating, and quick to get out of the range of the Panzer IV. No good idea of that. And there we go. Hammering away. The Panzer IV unable to defend itself. Scout car having taken quite a bit of damage. Hit another mine, as I'm of course keen on protecting this point. And there we go. Out of control. Panzer Grenadiers charging in. Panzer IV retreating. Now that it's actually a bit more exposed due to those airborne. And riflemen and engineers moving in to try and deal with those Panzer Grenadiers. So of course supporting it, as that is one way to deal with such combined armed attempts. Of course deal with the things that are supporting it, leaving the armor bit much more vulnerable. Airborne are continuing to focus down on the Panzer IV, while the riflemen are doing the duty of moving about, being a nuisance and dealing with those Panzer Grenadiers. We are seeing a second Panzer IV being rushed in, really hoping